everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Twisted Talks. I'm Tanya.
I'm Joshua. Doesn't that feel weird?
That
Normally
does feel weird. I don't like that. Don't do that.
Oh, sorry. God help my name.
Even like the fact that on all of our like podcast, like when you're saving the episodes, you put your name as Joshua. I know your name is Joshua. I know it's Joshua.
Sorry, let me go get a deed poll.
But you're Josh.
Is that what it's called?
But anyway, this week it's Joshua's turn to regale us with
okay, girl, I don't know what that word means.
To tell us a tale.
Okay.
And lads, look, I know the case he's doing.
Yes. So
this is definitely like we've covered some disturbing shit, but this one.
This is up there with Kellyanne Bates.
Yeah, definitely. I was
But
just
a
thinking the
different
same
type
thing.
of-
I was thinking the same thing. And I know, like, I haven't listened to anything on this case in a while. But it's one of those cases.
It's a case though that most true crime people have, definitely, whether it's briefly or
we're all
in-depthly,
familiar with it
know
in
of.
some way. But it is one of those cases that sticks with you. So, Josh, do you want to give the trigger warnings?
Yes. So, before I dive in, trigger warning for severe child abuse, torture, sexual abuse, and murder of a minor. I think that about covers everything.
And I just want to stress the word severe.
Severe is important in this.
So
Prolonged.
just absolute, like, yeah, systematic torture. Do not listen to this if you're sensitive to that in any way, shape or form, because there was different kinds of torture and abuse involved as well, so it would be very triggering for a lot of people.
So feel free to give it a skip if you need to.
Yes.
Or if you're feeling like it's getting too much at any point and you've already started, obviously turn it off.
Turn it off. Wish I could turn it off.
off.
We've not even started yet.
Yeah, I'm like, there was a few points. See, I'm kind of glad that obviously because I was researching it that I'm already like prepared.
I know I have tissues back here somewhere just in case I cry. We're not looking to repeat the Robert Black case where I had to go into your house to get tissues.
I forgot about that one.
I didn't.
Well, I didn't forget about the case, but
I didn't.
Anyhow. Oh, actually, moving on. I need to stop. I need to jump in because I've got quite a word count on this one. So, this week I am covering the brutal and tragic case that is the murder of 16-year-old Sylvia Likens, or is it Likens? That's what I was trying to figure out.
It's Likens, yeah.
Likens, while in the care of Gertrude Baniszewski.
Bitch.
Yeah. So let's start off with a bit of background on Gertrude, and I want to say as well, obviously, there's quite a lot of things in Gertrude's background as well that obviously that she went through a lot. But I feel like, given the way she turned out, that there must have been more in terms of her childhood or something.
It's just not known.
That's just not known or something, because I'm pretty sure she claimed to have a normal, fine childhood, but I feel like that can't be true.
I'm sure you did, Gertrude.
Now, don't get me wrong, maybe she didn't, she just turned out the way she turned out because she turned out the way she turned out. But normally, with these kind of people, there's something in their childhood.
Something's happened.
Yeah, but it's just something I like to know, not to excuse their behaviour or anything like that, but psychologically.
Yeah, because there is
to understand,
nothing that
not
could
to
excuse
justify, but to understand more
about the development and how they became the way they are. Yeah. So, Gertrude Nadine Baniszewski, maiden name Van Fossen, was born on the 19th of September 1929 in Indiana. Gertrude was born to Hugh and Molly Van Fossen, a working class family, and she was the third child to be born to the couple out of 6 children. Beautiful. So
bang in the middle, I suppose. Gertrude loved her father and was supposedly not very concerned or caring when it came to her mother, so she clearly had a favourite.
She said, "This is my parent. All you did was give birth to me.
This is my parent, you are an egg." But anyway, now obviously then the fact that she was more like in love, like attached, with her father. Then obviously in 1940, she obviously went through something quite traumatic for her. At 11 years old, Gertrude saw her father die in front of her of a sudden heart attack.
Oh, that's really sad.
So
that is really sad.
That's a lot. As a teenager, she would sometimes argue with her mother, who doesn't, but I'm assuming she argued maybe more because of the fact her dad was no longer there and she preferred her dad, and who's the anger going to go towards? Mother. So, and at the age of 16 years of age, that's not even how I wrote it.
Yeah, no.
Wrote it.
Wrote.
I wrote it properly but said it wrong.
That's
so
okay.
At 16 years of age, she dropped out of high school to marry 18-year-old John Baniszewski. John was from Pennsylvania and he later became a police officer, but this did not stop him from assaulting Gertrude anytime she got on his nerves. He was an abusive man, or at least to her anyway. John was from Pennsylvania, and I was just about to read the same paragraph again. That's
okay?
A flying start. No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not okay. No, I'm actually fine. I'm being so dramatic. So Gertrude and John had 4 children together. Paula, Stephanie, John Jr. and Marie. Mm-hmm. John would regularly take his anger out on Gertrude. As I said, he was violent and often beat her in front of the children. Obviously, whether it's in front of the children or not,
it's still wrong.
It's still
but
domestic abuse and shouldn't be done.
You got to traumatize
but
the kids too.
In front of the children as well.
Yeah.
So, despite John's volatile temper, the couple stayed together for 10 years before Gertrude took the children and left, divorcing John.
Go on, Gertrude.
For now. Gertrude then met and married a man called Edward Guthrie, but their marriage only lasted 3 months, as allegedly Edward did not want the responsibility of caring for children that were not his. As far as I'm concerned, Edward should have thought about that before getting into a relationship and marrying someone with 4 children.
Why you propose?
But we move.
Yep. Moving swiftly on.
So after that, Gertrude then went back to John and remarried him.
Okay.
They had a further 2 children together, Shirley and James. However, after 7 years around, I'm pretty sure that's what they all said, Gertrude and John divorced again for a final time in 1963. Now, not long after her third divorce, at the age of 34, Gertrude then moved in with Dennis Lee Wright. Sources vary on what age Dennis was, but he was either 20 or 22.
So she said, you know what, I'm going to go for a toy boy.
Basically. And obviously it wasn't the norm at the time for an unwed couple to live together, but they did. It is stated in some sources that Dennis was also abusive toward Gertrude, but I didn't see that in all the sources. Okay, so grain of salt. Gertrude got pregnant twice with Dennis. The first time she had a miscarriage, and the second time gave birth to a son, Dennis Jr. But after Dennis Jr. was born, Daddy Dennis said adios and left.
Daddy Dennis.
Yeah. So Gertrude then filed a paternity suit against Dennis, requesting that he contributed financially towards his child, which is obviously so fair, of course. He should contribute.
I would think that
you contributed to the making of the child, you can contribute to the sustenance of the child.
I think that's the absolute bare minimum that she could have, should have, and did ask for.
Now, the court obviously sided with Gertrude. I'd be concerned if they hadn't. However, nothing changed. Dennis never paid anything.
Standard.
But how? Why he getting away with not paying anything? Why he not being like pulled up to the courts or jailed, or I don't know, maybe jail sounds dramatic, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, like I do feel like that's something that happens
how can you
a lot.
Get away?
Like, it's something I hear of a lot.
How is it okay? Like, not only are you disrespecting the mother of your child by not even supporting the child, whether you want anything to do with them or not, but you're also not even respecting the ruling of a legal court.
I feel like as well it would have been easier to get away with not paying child support in the 60s, 70s, whatever time it was. So. You know, there was no technology, you could move around, change your address. Yeah, exactly.
By the time Gertrude met the Likens family, she was a single mother, was underweight, weighing about 100 pounds or 45 kilos.
Oh.
Yeah. Had a young, old look about her, so I'm assuming it was kind of like you could tell that she was young but she still haggard. Had old features.
She looked haggard.
And even though she was only 37 years old, she had supposedly been pregnant at least 13 times, giving birth 7 times and miscarrying 6.
Oh my God.
And obviously at this stage she had been divorced 3 times.
She lived a
Twice life. Divorced from the same person, once divorced from someone else.
Lived a life.
Yeah. Gertrude was a chain smoker who suffered from asthma and often got bronchitis.
Bronchitis?
Yeah, every time I hear that word, it's like that flashes in my brain. She was heavily dependent on the child support from John, her first and third husband.
Yes.
And father of 6 of her 7 children, to pay her bills and take care of her children. It is said in some sources that Gertrude called herself, now I didn't see this in many places, I think it was just like 1, maybe 2, so again, another pinch of salt because I'm not sure how credible it is. But that Gertrude called herself and was called by others Mrs. Wright.
Okay.
As she didn't want people to know that her youngest child, Dennis Jr., was born out of wedlock.
I suppose the stigma.
But then again, I'm like, if you can deal with the stigma of going through 3 divorces in the 1960s, I'm sure you can deal with the stigma of having a child out of wedlock. But again, I don't know about the societal pressures, so I'm not judging per se. I'm just trying to wrap my...
It's just my opinion.
It's just my opinion. It's just my opinion! But anyway, then we move on and let's talk about Sylvia Likens' background. Sylvia was born on the 3rd of January 1949 to parents Elizabeth, or Betty, and Lester Likens, who were carnival workers. Betty and Lester's work meant they were often on the road, travelling with the carnivals, you know, going around I don't know whether it was, I think it was more not just in that state, going out of state as well. The family was considered lower class, often struggling to pay bills and such. Betty and Lester Likens had 5 children, Daniel and Diana, who were fraternal twins, Sylvia, and Jenny and Benny, who were also fraternal twins.
Wow.
So Sylvia being the only child of the family who wasn't a twin. Now, Sylvia's younger sister Jenny was quiet and withdrawn and had actually gotten polio when she was younger, which resulted in her having a limp from weakness in one of her legs, and that caused her to need a leg brace. I believe it was a metal leg brace.
Yeah.
Because what else would it be, Josh?
Yeah.
It was a wooden one.
Yes.
Well, maybe they were a thing. I assume things were wooden before they were metal.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm going to look into that.
Yeah.
But anyway, metal leg brace. Sylvia was more confident in Jenny and had the nickname Cookie. Sylvia was described as pretty but was missing a front tooth. Some sources say that Sylvia would not open her mouth when she smiled because of the missing tooth. Which I feel like, I would be the same.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, fuck what people think at the same time. Yeah. So, Sylvia was very protective of Jenny. Obviously, it's her younger sister.
Yeah.
She's,
She's got a leg brace.
Yes, I would be too. And obviously they seem to be, must have been like closest out of the out of the siblings.
Maybe they were closest in age
closest
or
to each
something.
other. So, as a teenager, Sylvia would work odd jobs, like babysitting, for example, obviously jobs that were appropriate for her age. And she would give her earnings to her parents to help out with the finances. As I mentioned earlier, the family did struggle when it came to finances, so obviously she wanted to help when she could, where she could.
Yep.
There's not a whole pile of information on Sylvia's background, but I guess that's because she was so young and her life would have only been beginning.
Yep.
So there's not much that can be said. Now, moving to July 1965, so on the 3rd of July 1965, Sylvia's mother Betty was arrested for shoplifting and put in jail. Now, as you can imagine, this put more stress on the Likens family.
Yep.
Some sources report that Betty and Lester had marital problems, so no doubt this didn't help with that either. Lester couldn't take care of all the children on his own, and how could he go out and, I suppose, make money if he was minding all of them?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it was also stressful to the children that their mother was not around in general as well.
It's hard. It's a hard situation on everyone.
Yeah, like it's just not the vibe.
And especially when they're already struggling financially and now they've lost a wage.
Now there's like not 2 people able to work. There's not even 1 person able to work because...
He's got responsibilities. He's got to look after the kids.
Because as far as I know going forward at some point in this, so I think all of them kind of worked. Mm-hmm. Like the kids as well on the carnivals, except for Sylvia and Jenny.
Okay, so that's why Sylvia was doing the babysitting and the age-appropriate jobs.
Yes, where she could. Where am I going?
Yeah, like I'd imagine that with them travelling with the carnival, she wouldn't have had like a regular family that she would babysit for, so it was probably more likely that it was just whenever and wherever she could find someone who needed a babysitter. Kind of
like, I don't know where you'd find who needs a babysitter back in those times. I'm assuming newspapers and like maybe some sort of bulletin boards or something like that. So Lester tried to find boarding for Sylvia and Jenny so that the rest of them could return to working at the carnival and make money and whatnot. The oldest daughter of the family was married and living her own life, so she was unable to go working at the carnival with them to help out financially because, obviously she got a husband, she got a life, she got to do her thing. The 2 boys of the family would go with Lester to work the carnivals, as I said. However, Lester didn't think it would be safe for the youngest daughters to work at the carnivals, which is why he wanted to find boarding for them and keep them in Indiana. However, as we'll get into, the girls would have been much safer at the carnival than where they were boarded. While at school, Sylvia becomes friends with a girl called Stephanie, who is a daughter of aforementioned Gertrude.
Bitch.
Yeah. Stephanie invited Sylvia to have a sleepover at her house, so as friends do. They had their sleepover, and when Lester would go to collect Sylvia from the sleepover, he would end up speaking with Gertrude and telling her about how he is trying to find somewhere for Sylvia and Jenny to stay so that him and the boys can go working. Mm-hmm. It was at this point that Gertrude suggested that Sylvia and Jenny stay with her, and Lester pay her $20 a week, just for minding them, I suppose, whatever.
Towards food and board, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is fair.
Which would actually now, with the inflation, would be around $194. Wow. So,
Mad how money works.
Isn't it? I'm like, wow. Because I was like, to be fair, if nowadays, if you thought you were minding someone for $20 a week, it's like, that wouldn't even cover a day's dinner.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Practically.
That wouldn't even cover the ESB for the shower.
Do you know what I mean? It is worth mentioning as well that Gertrude was just as poor as the Likens and was already trying to support her own 7 children. She made a little bit of money by ironing laundry for her neighbours for a fee.
But as you said earlier, she was reliant on the child
more
support.
so reliant on the child support from John. Now, it is also said that Gertrude had extreme depression and took heavy doses of prescription drugs. Now, whether that means prescription drugs as in they were prescribed to her, or whether she was just taking prescription drugs, I don't know. I'm assuming if she had extreme depression, they were prescribed to her. She was clearly in no position to be taking in another 2 girls. With that said, I'm not saying clearly as in the girl's father should have known not to put them there. I'm just saying as in going by what we know in this episode so far.
Yeah.
Like, I doubt Lester would have known any of that.
Yeah, like he had just met her.
Literally. Well, also, why would you leave? I'm not going to get into it.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to go there.
Desperate times, Josh.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
And I suppose if she came across to him as someone that he could potentially trust with his daughters, and, you know, like his wife was in jail, he had to take his other kids to go make money, like...
You would assume it's fine when it's a friend from school, basically.
Yeah, like she was friends with the daughter.
Now, as I said, I doubt Lester would have known any of that. However, I do think he could have vetted the house a little bit better before leaving the girls there, given what would unfold. But we'll get more into that later. Now, obviously, this was ideal. This suggestion was ideal for Lester. You know, there wouldn't be any need for the changing of schools or anything like that. And Sylvia was friends with Stephanie, so she would have a friend and be with people she knew. Sylvia and Jenny began staying with Gertrude and her children in early July of 1965, so their father could go working at the carnivals and their mother would later join him. And initially things were going quite well. Sylvia and Jenny helped with the housework and were treated fairly in the house, and they would also attend Sunday school service. There were often times where Gertrude's oldest daughter, 17-year-old Paula, seemed to clash with Sylvia. She was jealous of Sylvia. She thought that Sylvia was very good looking and pretty, and obviously Paula lacked the confidence in her looks and envied Sylvia for having looks.
And took it out on Sylvia.
Yeah. Now, however, as time went on, the $20 weekly payment that Gertrude and Lester had agreed to wasn't showing up consistently or on time anymore. This made Gertrude very angry, and she began to take this anger out on Sylvia and Jenny. So, trigger warning now, this is where the trigger warnings come in. This is because we're about to start that. I would like to say that in terms of how I go through this, I'm not sure if I have it exactly in order of how the abuse happened, but you're still going to get. But the most parts that need to be in order are in order, and it will give an idea and the information needed to understand the extent of it. So, one of the first instances of Gertrude taking her unwarranted anger out on them was when Gertrude said, quote, "Well, I took care of you 2 little bitches for a week for nothing," end quote. Gertrude grabbed Sylvia by the arm, dragged her into a room, closing the door behind them, while Jenny was left sitting outside the door, hearing her sister get beat with a 1/4-inch paddle. The money that was owed to Gertrude arrived the next day, but this was still only the beginning of the abuse. There was another instance where they were beat or hit at least 15 times with the paddle for apparently eating too much at a church dinner.
Because they ate too much food at church.
Yeah. How very godly of her.
Not even that, like, they ate too much of the food in her house.
That she paid for, and that it was
literally that they ate too much food at the church dinner.
Now, it was also apparent that most of the abuse was targeted at Sylvia. So by now, not only is Sylvia getting bullied or picked on by Gertrude's children, aka Paula, potentially the others, but this Gertrude bitch is also beating her on top of that.
Yeah.
Gertrude soon started to abuse Sylvia and Jenny in broad daylight. She may have been a frail woman, but as mentioned, she used a heavy paddle and a thick leather belt to beat them. Now, just to give more information on the belt, it was a belt that had belonged to John, so it was a police officer belt.
Lovely.
So it was
like a heavy duty, thick, yeah.
Now, if there was any instance where Gertrude was too tired or weak to discipline the girls, she would have Paula step in to do it.
And I'm sure Paula was only delighted.
Cunt.
Gertrude then began to demand that Sylvia's own sister Jenny join in, or else she would have to take Sylvia's place and take most of the abuse.
And I suppose because Sylvia was so protective of Jenny as
and
well.
To be honest, if I was, I don't know, I feel like if I was in that situation and I was that protective, I would be encouraging her to take part so that she doesn't have to get...
Yeah, if it was me and you, I would be like, batter me. Just batter me. I'm not seeing you get battered.
Just go for it.
Yeah.
Do you know? Gertrude once accused Sylvia of stealing from her, and as punishment burned Sylvia's fingertips. I can only imagine that the sisters were already terrified of this awful woman and her children, so I can highly doubt that Sylvia dared to steal from her.
No, absolutely not.
I think that it was either one of her own children that stole, or else nothing was stolen and this horrid woman was just making up an excuse to beat Sylvia. That's my opinion.
And I would not be surprised if it was the latter.
Yeah, I really wouldn't. In another instance, Gertrude took Sylvia to a church function and force-fed her free hot dogs until she vomited. Then, to punish her for vomiting up good food, she forced Sylvia to eat her own vomit.
I remember this bit, yeah.
Not only did Gertrude allow her children to take part in the abuse, she encouraged it.
Yeah.
It's...
like, she's a very sick individual.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's abuse and then there's this shit.
And it's like, in one hand, it's like, how much blame can you put on Gertrude's children or any children involved in this case, in the simple sense it's a product of the environment. But also, at the same time, I don't know, it's a thin line.
Very, very thin line. Very thin line.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a hair's width thin.
Gertrude's children treated Sylvia like a rag doll. They practiced karate on her, slammed her into walls and onto the floor. They used Sylvia's skin as an ashtray, threw her down the stairs and literally cut her skin and rubbed salt into the wounds. Then she would be cleansed in a scalding hot bath.
Like, this is just some depraved shit, like...
I don't even know if that's the word, to be honest.
No, it's not strong enough.
It's so bad.
It's not strong enough.
Gertrude gave sermons on the evils of sexual immorality while Paula was stomping on Sylvia's vagina. Paula, who was pregnant, accused Sylvia of being pregnant and mutilated her genitals. In another source, I saw that one day Sylvia had come home from school and spoke to her sister Jenny about having a boyfriend at school, and Paula kicked Sylvia in the vagina. Now, whether this is part of the same incident that I just mentioned or it's a separate one, I'm not entirely sure, because maybe that was what triggered the sermons and the fucking whatever. So that could be the same incident. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was two separate incidences.
Yeah.
Incidents even, sorry. There was one time where Gertrude beat Sylvia for stealing candy. However, Sylvia had paid for it and did not steal it.
She's just seeing what she wants to see so that she can abuse this little girl, like.
Gertrude's 12-year-old son, John Jr., would get enjoyment from forcing Sylvia to lick his youngest sibling's soiled diapers clean.
Oh, that is disgusting.
There was an instance as well where Sylvia was forced to... This is very strong trigger warning, specifically regarding to sexual abuse and whatnot. Where Sylvia was forced to get naked and shove an empty Coca-Cola or Pepsi-Cola bottle into her vagina while Gertrude's children watched. And remember as well, I'm sure given that the time frame this was, when it was, the bottles were glass.
That's like one of the things about this case that's always stuck with me.
Yeah. And also, bear in mind, in a lot of these instances, it wasn't just Gertrude's children there, it was children from the neighbourhood as well. In some instances, there is some parts where I mention specifically when they're involved. There is other parts where I don't mention, but they might have been there and I'm just not 100% sure.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And it's like, did these kids not go home and tell their parents? You know?
No. Yeah. Sylvia and Jenny's mother obviously, didn't spend much time in prison for the shoplifting charge. It's quite a small charge. Why they're not going to keep you in prison that long for a small shoplifting charge. And obviously, as planned, had joined their father Lester working at the carnivals. Betty and Lester would visit from time to time when they were able to get away from work. However, they didn't notice anything wrong with their two daughters, which I find quite confusing. I'm not trying to say
like trying to shame them or anything, but I just don't understand how you would not notice. Now, I get that the girls wouldn't say anything because they're terrified.
But they would.
But how could their own parents not pick up that something was wrong, or notice evidence of abuse on the girl's skin, or something?
Even just changes in temperament.
Do you know what I mean? Their attitude, their behaviour. Now, I guess they are teenagers as well, so you could brush it off and be like, they're teenagers.
They're stroppy because we left them here.
I don't think, like, if something like... I just don't see... Anyway. Anyway. You know, I don't get that. Now, while Betty and Lester would be there, obviously nothing would happen. But as soon as they would be gone, back to the abuse.
Yeah.
Sylvia and Jenny would go to a local park together, and it was there that they actually bumped into their older sister, Diana. Sylvia told Diana that she was hungry, and Diana gave her a sandwich, but one of Gertrude's children had seen it, told Gertrude, and yes, you guessed it, Sylvia was later punished.
For eating a sandwich her sister gave her.
Yeah.
But Gertrude is insane.
Honestly. Like, but it's weird because I don't even like to use the word insane because I'm like, she was aware of what she was doing. So,
yeah, no, to be fair, that's not the correct term,
but I know exactly what you mean.
It's what felt right at the time.
There was another time that Sylvia and Jenny bumped into Diana and they told her about the abuse. However, Diana didn't believe them, or she thought that they were exaggerating or something. Now, I don't know why you wouldn't believe a sibling when they tell you something like that, especially when, if Diana checked, there surely would have been evidence on the girls, or at least on Sylvia, like bruises, scars, or something.
It's not like Gertrude was given time for the bruises and the
do you know what I mean? So, like, I don't kind of get that.
Especially with Sylvia, like, Sylvia's abuse was so horrific.
And constant.
Yeah.
So, again, I just don't get that. Sylvia had been... at one point. Sylvia had been beaten so badly that she was unable to voluntarily use the bathroom, and so she was incontinent.
Yeah.
And when she wet her mattress, Gertrude decided Sylvia was no longer fit to live with the rest of her children. So she locked 16-year-old Sylvia in the basement without food or access to the bathroom. As there was no bathroom, and Gertrude had Sylvia tied up in the basement, Sylvia would have to go to the toilet standing up in the basement. Once again, this would make Gertrude angry because her existence made her angry.
Yeah.
So when Sylvia would wet herself standing up in the basement, Gertrude would tie Sylvia's hands and feet together and throw her into very hot water in the bathtub to get her clean before returning her to the basement. And obviously this would happen multiple times a day because Sylvia had nowhere to go toilet except standing up in the basement she was trapped in.
Yeah.
So...
It's like that one incident of her wetting the mattress, Gertrude saw that and was like, okay, well, I'm going to make it so that this happens more often so that I can punish her more.
Yeah, but not even with a mattress, just standing in a basement. It's awful. However, the abuse didn't stop there, and it was no longer just Gertrude and her children anymore. Gertrude began to spread every story she could think up to the local children to get them to join in on the beatings. Gertrude told her daughter that Sylvia had called her a whore and got her daughter's friends to come over to the house and beat Sylvia up for it. Later during trial, some of the children from the area were open about how Gertrude had gotten them involved. One teenage girl, Anna Sisko, recalled that Gertrude had told her that Sylvia had been saying that her mother, Anna's mother, went out with all sorts of men and got $5 for going to bed with the men.
So basically...
Sylvia obviously didn't say that. Gertrude made that up.
So Gertrude was like, yeah, she said your mother's a prostitute.
Essentially, a cheap one at that. Well, maybe that's not that cheap in the time frame, I don't know. But Anna had never checked, obviously, to see if this was even true. But then again, I guess when you're a child and an adult saying it, what reason do you have to believe they're lying?
Exactly.
As well on that kind of, you know. But Gertrude had told Anna that she didn't care what she did to Sylvia and invited her over to the home and watched as Anna threw Sylvia onto the ground, beat her face and kicked her. Gertrude told her own children that Sylvia was a prostitute. Gertrude then had a boy from the neighbourhood, Ricky Hobbs, and her 11-year-old daughter Marie carve the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's abdomen with a heated needle.
I've forgotten about that.
Yeah.
That is awful. Like,
it's just one brutality after another.
It's the fact that even if Sylvia had survived, she would have constantly been reminded, even without the trauma, just the physical scars, and like she would have been absolutely traumatized for the rest of her life. I'm sorry.
Just as confused as you about
I've just seen 2 children walk past the car, and one of them is holding the other one by her hair.
My Little Pony.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, like,
it's
like, I don't know if Sylvia would have ever had a chance at a normal life after this.
It would have been.
And that's not at all me saying like, oh, it's better that she died, because it's not.
No,
like,
of course not.
This shouldn't have happened to her in the first place.
But I feel like she would have had a lot of torment going forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully, had she survived, she would have been able to get over it. But we'll, you know, like, make peace in some aspect. But I suppose, obviously, we'll never know.
We'll never know, yeah.
So, at one point, Sylvia and Jenny's older sister Diana did try to see the girls while they were in Gertrude's care, but she was turned away at the door by Gertrude, who claimed that Betty and Lester had said the girls were not allowed to see Diana, and that, I'd imagine, was very much bullshit to prevent Diana from seeing the way the girls were, especially Sylvia. A neighbourhood of Gertrude had reported incidents to a public health nurse. One of the resources specifically reported it to the school, and the school nurse was sent out.
Which I don't know why the school wouldn't have noticed something.
Yeah, because this neighbour had reported, I think, seeing like welts or marks anyway on a girl that lives in Gertrude's house. But when the nurse entered the home and could not see Sylvia, the nurse concluded that there was nothing wrong. First of all, excuse me, check the whole fucking house, including the basement. Surely that's what you're supposed to do with a report like that. Thoroughly check out the place. Gertrude also did, though, manage to convince the nurse that she had kicked Sylvia and Jenny out and that they no longer resided with her. Now, some reports say that she convinced the nurse that she'd kicked Sylvia and Jenny out, but other reports say that she convinced the nurse that she only kicked Sylvia out, and Gertrude obviously had the fear of God instilled into Jenny and got Jenny to go along with it. Yeah. Out of fear. So
probably
one
told her,
or
if
other.
you open your mouth, I'm going to kick the shit out of your sister.
Or both of you.
Or both of you, yeah.
Yeah. So, now, allegedly other neighbours were aware of how Sylvia was abused, at least to an extent anyway. They had seen Paula hit Sylvia in the home on 2 different occasions, but claimed not to report the abuse because they feared for their own lives. Now, I'm sorry, if these neighbours were children, okay, I get that. The fear enough to not say anything makes sense. But if they were adults, fuck off. You didn't report it because you're a shit human being.
Yeah, because you wanted an easy life and you didn't want to bring the drama.
Yeah. And that should not be the priority in that kind of situation.
Absolutely fucking not.
Now, Jenny was also threatened, bullied and beaten by Gertrude's children and neighbourhood children. She was warned against going to the authorities, and obviously I can completely understand why Jenny would have been too scared to get help. Can't even begin to imagine the kind of fear instilled into her between how she was treated and even more so seeing how her sister was being treated. Some sources also say that Gertrude had at some point, whether this was way back or whether this was more now times, not now times obviously, but like at this point in the story, that Gertrude had at some point told the girls that if they told anyone, she would kill them.
And they would absolutely have.
And that is 100%
I believe
believable.
she would have.
Yeah.
I believe she would have.
100%. The abuse and torture of Sylvia continued, and not one person helped her. Everyone else seemed to either join in on the abuse of Sylvia or just say nothing. There were times where Sylvia would actually pass out from the pain of what was being done to her, but this would madden Gertrude even more, and Gertrude would bash Sylvia's head against the wall to wake her up again.
This poor girl.
Yeah. Gertrude would have the neighbourhood children over. This fucking got me. And she would charge them 5 cents to abuse Sylvia. This monster literally got children to pay her to come over and abuse Sylvia. I was like, this case is something else. It's one thing after another, and actually just horrible. Like, what a despicable bitch.
She's evil.
Honestly.
Like, there is no humanity in this woman. There is no humanity. There's no soul. Like, I was thinking there a minute ago, I don't know how anyone could lay a hand on a child, let alone to this extent.
If I believed in the preachings of the Bible, Satan wouldn't even want her.
No. Absolutely fucking not.
So, as you can imagine, Sylvia was extremely malnourished, and Gertrude's children would torture her by offering her food, but quickly take the food away. As if all the physical abuse wasn't enough, let's psychologically and mind fuck with this girl.
Like, this poor, like, I just don't see how Sylvia could go through all of that and retain any amount of hope that it would get better, or that she would get away from it, or that she would not end up dead. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like a lot of people, when they're going through abusive situations, they retain that sense of hope that they'll escape, they'll build a better life for themselves, and they'll never have to go through it again. But with the extent...
And the circumstances in terms of being boarded there by her parents and...
The fact that her parents, like, you know, sent her to live there, which obviously they didn't know this was going to happen.
No, of course not. And I'm sure Sylvia knew that also, obviously.
The only person she probably had was her sister, and even though she likely knew that her sister had to partake in these beatings and in the abuse to keep herself safe, it's like... I don't doubt that she knew that the neighbourhood kids were paying to come in and hurt her.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to know what that would do to someone's mentality.
It's soul destroying.
It's soul destroying, and especially someone so young. Like, at any age,
that's
it's awful.
A serious amount to go through.
She was 16.
Yeah. It's I don't even know. Now, remember when I said about the use of a hot needle to carve words into Sylvia's skin?
Yeah.
At one point, Gertrude's children decided to brand Sylvia with an S. However, it turned out to be the number 3 because they're all a bunch of fucking apes. And then Gertrude would sexually abuse Sylvia and tease her about how she wouldn't be able to get married now because she was branded, and telling Sylvia that her body is garbage now. In late October of 1965, the 23rd of October, I believe, so almost 4 whole months since Sylvia and Jenny moved into Gertrude's house, and probably, about 3.5 months since the abuse started, give or take.
The fact that all of this happened in literally 3.5 months, Josh.
Yeah, because the first couple of weeks were supposedly relatively okay, bar Paula.
Like, that is
So yeah, so the 23rd of October, Sylvia had actually told her sister Jenny, I think there is more to this quote, but I've just taken the last bit that I could find from a credible source. So Sylvia told her sister Jenny, quote, I'm going to die, I can tell, end quote. Gertrude could obviously tell how bad the condition Sylvia was in was, and she forced Sylvia to write a note saying that she'd run away, and Gertrude also made her say in the note that she had met up with a group of boys and given them sexual favours, and that after this they had beaten her and mutilated her body. So obviously Gertrude trying to cover her tracks of all the marks and the bruising and the so on and so forth. Gertrude was planning to give this letter to Sylvia's parents the next time they came to see Sylvia and Jenny. So remember, that was the 23rd of October. On the 25th of October, Sylvia overheard Gertrude telling her children that she was going to take Sylvia to a forest area and leave her there to die. So Sylvia made a desperate attempt to escape. Sadly, Sylvia only made it to just outside the front door before Gertrude caught her.
And she probably wouldn't have had much...
Exactly, like Sylvia was seriously weak from her injuries and obviously severely malnourished as well. So it would have been next to impossible for her to get far even if Gertrude hadn't caught her.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, if Gertrude hadn't caught her, she might have gotten far enough for someone to notice something, but also she might have only gotten far enough for one of them to run out and whip her back in really quickly. Yeah. So it's hard to tell how that could have gone.
Yeah.
Sylvia was... Oh yeah, so like I said, wouldn't have gotten far.
Yeah.
But with help from Coy Hubbard, a boy from the neighbourhood, Gertrude beat Sylvia with a curtain rod until she blacked out. When Sylvia was conscious again, Gertrude stomped on her head before putting her back in the basement. Later that evening, Sylvia was banging on the basement walls and screaming as loud as she could, hoping that a neighbour or passerby outside would hear her. Now, given her condition, I'm not sure how loud that screaming would have been.
Or the
banging. But then again, also knowing you're probably going to die, the adrenaline might have kicked in to enable it to be loud.
Yeah.
And a neighbour did later testify. This also is the importance, I would like to say before I say, if you hear something and you think something is going down, call the guards, the police, whoever you think needs to be called. And if the sound stops, still call them, because just because the sound stops doesn't mean that the issue is dealt with or that the police are already there. Don't make assumptions. It's better for them to get fucking an extra call that they don't need than to not get a call at all.
Exactly. And what have you got to lose in the situation?
Exactly. You're just
what?
Doing your part.
The best thing that could happen is that the police come to your door and they say, okay, well, actually nothing came of that. Everything is fine. It was a TV or it was a radio or it was something that, Like, that's the positive outcome of the situation. So
the reason I say that is because a neighbour did later testify to having heard someone screaming or yelling for help, but that they stopped. So the neighbour decided against calling the police because she assumed that whatever was going on had been resolved.
No, I'm sorry. No.
Now, I completely get the logic to it, but that's why I was also saying, just make sure to make the call.
Yeah, like I understand.
If it crosses your mind that you think that call needs to be made, make it.
Yeah, don't hesitate. Don't second guess yourself. Don't.
Like Tanya said, worst that's going to happen is you're going to be told, oh, it wasn't anything bad.
Yeah.
Or it'll be resolved, whatever it is. Now, Sylvia was incredibly weak by now and had tried to crawl up the basement stairs to escape again, but she couldn't make it, and Gertrude would be at the top of the staircase of the basement and would beat her back down. So this was by the 26th of October, so 3 days after Sylvia said to Jenny that she was going to die and that she could tell.
The day after her escape attempt.
And the day after her escape attempt. So yes, by the 26th of October 1965, Sylvia was dead due to a brain hemorrhage, shock and malnutrition. Sylvia had endured unimaginable suffering for more than 3 months at the hands of this diabolical woman, her children and children from the neighbourhood. In the end, Sylvia could not even form intelligible words and could barely move her limbs. When Gertrude realised that Sylvia was dead, at first she thought that Sylvia was faking it.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Mm-hmm. Gertrude told her daughter's boyfriend, so Stephanie's boyfriend to be specific, that he needed to call the police but to go do it from a local payphone? Why did I speak like that? Payphone. Stephanie's boyfriend leaves the house and obviously calls the police from a payphone. When the police arrived at Gertrude's house, she stuck with the bullshit story she had concocted that Sylvia had been out with the boys in the woods. She told the police that the boys she was with had beaten her and carved "I'm a prostitute and proud of it" into her body, and that Sylvia had returned home in this bad state and that Gertrude had tried to take care of her and clean her up, but unfortunately she died because Gertrude was so loving and caring and trying to nurse her.
Piece of fucking shit.
But anyway, Jenny, as soon as she saw the opportunity to and was close enough to a police officer, whispered to the officer, quote, "Get me out of here and I'll tell you everything," unquote.
Good woman, Jenny.
The police got Jenny out of the house and spoke to her, and she explained everything that had been happening in Gertrude's house. Based on the, testimony or statement given by Jenny on a murder charge, the police arrested Gertrude and 3 of her children, Paula, Stephanie and John Jr., as well as 2 of the boyfriends, Richard Hobbs and Coy Hubbard. Those in the neighbourhood that took part were arrested on the charge of injury to person. The following were arrested on that charge: Mike Monroe, Randy Lepper, Darlene Maguire, Judy Duke and Anna Sisko. All these participants were minors and would blame Gertrude for pressuring them into taking part. These minors were released to their parents' custodies, but all had to appear in court and give a statement. To say that's getting off lightly is an understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how their involvement should have been handled, to be completely honest, because I do understand they're minors, and obviously there was an adult coercing as well, to an extent.
Yeah.
But to just basically let them walk away doesn't sit right to me.
No, absolutely not.
Like, even community service doesn't sound like enough to me, but at least do that. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, at first Gertrude denied having any involvement and only admitted to having forcing Sylvia to sleep in the basement when she was wetting the bed because she didn't want her mattress ruined.
Lovely.
Love that. Gertrude would become very agitated when police officers would ask more questions about what happened. The officers were essentially telling Gertrude that her story and Sylvia's body and internal damage did not align. In regard to the autopsy, Sylvia's autopsy showed that she had over 150 wounds on her body. She was extremely thin and malnourished. There were cuts, burns, bruises and severe muscle damage. All of Sylvia's fingernails were bent backwards and she was missing... This is the worst part for me.
God.
And she was missing the top layer of skin on her face, neck, chest and right knee. Sylvia had also bitten through her lips when she died, almost separating them from her face. And the official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. So probably as a result of something to do with the beating from the curtain pole or beating her back down the stairs of the basement.
Yeah. Something
along those lines. Gertrude, her daughter Paula and son John Jr. were going to be tried for first-degree murder. The charges against Gertrude's daughter Stephanie were dropped due to insufficient evidence. However, Stephanie agreed to testify against her family at trial. Richard Hobbs and Coy Hubbard were charged with premeditated malice. Gertrude's defence was she was not guilty by reason of insanity. Her defence lawyer told the court that, quote, "she's not responsible because she's not all here," end quote.
Fuck off.
Yeah, she's there, trust me. She's there and she's an evil cunt.
Systematically abused a 16-year-old girl for 3.5 months.
Yeah.
Was coherent enough to recognise that Sylvia was dying and get her to write a letter to cover her arse.
Wait for the next part of what she said.
Oh, Josh.
Gertrude also claimed that she was not responsible for the children because the other children were responsible for the children because she was too depressed to be able to take control of the household. But, sorry, as if she wasn't in control. No, but as if she wasn't in control of the household. She was like a fucking mob boss of some children's cartel, getting them to abuse Sylvia while she watched and more times than not, took part. If anything, she had more control than most people do over their household as far as I'm concerned, as well as control over neighbourhood kids.
Yeah, which is concerning.
Very concerning.
Concerning.
But anyway, the trial and decision of the jury took 17 days until the 19th of May 1966, and Gertrude was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Paula was sentenced to second-degree murder. Was convicted of second-degree murder and was also sentenced to life imprisonment. Richard, Coy and John Jr. were all convicted of manslaughter and given 2 to 21-year prison sentences based on them being minors. However, all 3 of them made parole 2 years after the trial in 1968.
No.
Richard had a mental breakdown once the weight of what he had done hit him, and he began smoking very heavily and died of lung cancer at 21.
Jesus Christ.
Good luck. Coy was in and out of prison for his entire life and died of a heart attack at 56. John Jr. went on to work several jobs and became a minister.
Are you fucking serious?
He died of cancer in 2005 at the age of 52. Well, they all got no luck. They didn't get long lives. Mm-hmm. Especially Richard.
Yeah.
His was very short.
Good enough for him.
Yeah.
I personally
Any
look,
of them
right?
involved. The way I look at it, I'm like, if the justice system couldn't figure out a way to deal with them, the universe certainly did.
Yeah. In terms of Gertrude, right, I did have like a little thought when you said she got sentenced to life imprisonment, where I was like, she should have got the death penalty, but I don't believe in the death penalty because
it's in one of my resources, I'm sure, because it did say it somewhere. That her own lawyer said she should get the death penalty.
I think death's too easy. It's too good for her.
No, but my main concern with death is clearly not in this case, but my main issue with the death penalty is there's so many instances where someone gets killed and then it turns out they're innocent.
Yeah.
And also, I think
in this case, she's guilty.
Yeah.
But I personally hope that she got sent to an absolute...
You're going to be very angry soon.
Oh, Josh, don't do it to me.
But
no, you're not the one doing it,
But no, as well, like, I agree as well. First of all, it's actually, as far as I know, last time I saw about statistics and stuff, it actually costs more to kill someone with the death penalty than it does to put them in jail for the rest of their lives.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, also, it's cheaper in terms of taxpayer money to keep them in a prison cell, and also leaving them in a 4x4 cell to live like that.
She didn't even deserve a cell.
Punishment.
Like, I'm not sorry. I was going to say I'm sorry now.
She needed indefinite solitude.
I'm not sorry. She should have been thrown in a fucking pit full of rats, and she would have been lucky to get food thrown down to her once a month.
And I hope the rats attacked her.
In my opinion.
But anyway.
Like, I don't wish ill on anyone.
But this bitch.
But I cannot.
I wish much ill.
I cannot wish enough ill on her.
Yeah. Now, in 1971, both Gertrude and Paula were retried. And the reason they were retried is something to do with, there was a technicality to do with the judge in the first case, in the first trial of each of them. Something about refusing to, something to do with the defence anyway. So basically because he didn't let the defence have access to everything or something along those lines. Obviously that made it not a fair trial by definition.
Yeah.
So they were both retried, and Gertrude was again obviously found guilty, but Paula pleaded guilty to a lesser charge instead of going to trial. Paula pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 2 to 21 years imprisonment. In late 1972, Paula was released.
Excuse me?
Mm-hmm. And she moved... Wait. She moved to Iowa, where she changed her name and became a teacher's aide.
She what?
How was someone with her history
what?
even allowed to be a teacher's aide? Now, obviously, someone else was wondering the same thing, because in 2012...
Paula was suspended from her position when an anonymous caller told the school district that Paula was once convicted of the death of 16-year-old Sylvia Likens. Now, I still want to know why someone had to tip them off and this wasn't something they managed to figure out through a vetting process. Even if she gave her a new name, they should have been able to figure it out if the vetting process was thorough enough. Anyway.
I have to be Garda vetted every 2 years.
Do you know what I mean?
Every 2 years.
Obviously, and America.
Literally every 2 fucking years. If I start a new job in the morning, even though I'm Garda vetted at my current job, I have to be Garda vetted again in order to start that new job.
Now, obviously, I'm sure things, bear in mind, I'm assuming if she would have gotten, maybe she became a teacher's aide not long after release, so this was probably back in the 70s again.
Yeah.
So I suppose the vetting process now would probably be way better.
It would definitely be way stricter,
It's just back then, obviously, it wasn't up to code at all. Gertrude was considered to be a model prisoner and worked in the prison sewing room and was nicknamed Mom by other prisoners.
Are you fucking joking me?
Mom.
They called her Mom?
Mom.
They called her Mom?
Mom.
She couldn't have been a mom to Sylvia? No?
Well, she wasn't even a mother to her own children
no,
because she was getting them to do horrid things. Yeah. Now after...
I'm getting heated.
Yeah. Well, you might want to take a few deep breaths. After 20 years behind bars, still not long enough if you ask me, Gertrude was granted parole on good behaviour on the 4th of December 1985. Jenny Likens and a crowd of other people picketed outside the prison in protest of Gertrude's release, but it made no difference. Gertrude was a free woman.
That is fucking disgraceful.
Yep. Gertrude moved to Iowa and changed her name to Nadine Van Fossen, so using, I suppose, her middle name and her maiden name. Just under 5 years after her release, Gertrude died of lung cancer on the 16th of June 1990. Good fucking riddance. I said, the justice system failed and let her out. The universe took the wheel.
I hope it was painful. I hope she had the worst lung cancer a person could ever fucking have. And again, I do not wish these things on people. But this bitch...
I hope she suffered as much as she made Sylvia suffer, if not more. Now... Jenny Likens went on to marry a man and have children, and she never blamed her parents for what happened. She said that her parents were just trying to make ends meet and that they did the best they could at the time.
Yeah.
Fair. In 2001, a memorial for Sylvia was erected in Indianapolis. I'll put a picture of the memorial in the social media posts for this week's episode. So yeah, this is truly a tragic and absolutely horrendous case. And that is the case of the murder of Sylvia Likens and the evil monster who shall not be named again. And as we said earlier, we've covered so many cases, and 99% of the time, they're awful and sad, and there's always some sort of evil involved. But this case for me is way up there and being one of the worst.
That 1% he's speaking of is the aliens. Because everything else has been dark and twisted.
Yeah,
it's called Twisted Talks. This case and the Hello Kitty murder.
I looked into that a few times, yeah.
Funnily enough, I was actually thinking of covering that this week, and I'm really glad I didn't. Yeah,
it's not so good either.
But this and the Hello Kitty murders just really stick with me.
The other one as well is the Kellyanne Bates one.
Yeah, that one was.
That one was
really,
that was
really
brutal
tough.
as well. So on that note, that's the end of this week's episode.
We're not going to be doing a cheerful little ending this time, guys. I'm sorry, I'm not capable. I don't have the facilities for that. So once
again, guys, thank you for joining in and listening, and I hope you're not too traumatized after that.
Yeah, if you've made it this far,
go get yourself a cup of tea and meditate.
Yeah, take a walk outside if the weather permits.
Hold a crystal, hug a tree,
cuddle your dog,
lick your man.
I don't have a man.
Lick Tinder profiles. Clean the screen of the phone while you're at it.
Lovely.
Yeah, that's that. So, guys, I don't even know what to say at this point. So, once again, thanks for listening. Love and light to all of you. Stay safe, stay cool, stay groovy. Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao. In a slightly more depressed tone.